you've obviously pondered this, and you've been looking at this and have put it into, I assume, some sort of format. And that's kind of where I'd love to learn more about this process and um, how we can apply it. And at least that's one of the things I'm dying to hear more about.
Yeah, how do we bring it to the world? That's the
Yeah.
thing, right? So
Yeah. And like even before that, there's the idea that, well, I guess the acknowledgement that, or the re-acknowledgement perhaps that that we are biology, and that that's something that we might want to be in touch with and sort of thoughtful about as we're doing things in the world, if we want good outcomes. And like I say that just because like that's not an assumption that we can make that we're doing that, because one of the sage sort of pieces of advice I've had at one point along the time is, you know, if you're trying to figure out what the purpose of something is, look at what it's doing. And so if we look at what the world is doing, it seems like the purpose is to consume as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and have the benefits accrue to a few. So in contrast to that would be a purpose I'm interested in, which is living in healthy relationship with nature, or the rest of nature, so that we can continue the privilege of being on this planet for the foreseeable future, which at the moment I would argue is very much in threat, or at risk.
right.
Absolutely.
Could I ask a question just to clarify if I understand correctly? So you say that we need to start with recognizing that we are biology. Is that as an opposite to that we are a spirit or we are energy? Or is it for a moment setting aside that part and right now recognizing that we are part of nature? Is, or how do you what's behind those words, that we are biology?
Yeah, I guess in response to that, I would say maybe a word that might not invoke such a question might be saying that we are life. And then maybe that allows a little bit more interpretation of the pieces that make up life, such as spirit or energy, etc. And at the same time, potentially bringing some energy to the ideas that biology provide, the ideas of life that might not necessarily be being considered on a daily basis in terms of how we do that life, how we be that life.
Right. Is it in a sense that the way we go about it as humans is that we kind of like feel above nature? We do our thing, you know, as if we were not part of nature. Is that how to see it?
It could be, but I think it's also opening ourselves up for a lot of critique to say that. But I would agree with that idea, and the way that I would say it is, as humans who have a particularly advanced nervous system, one which allows us to have consciousness and self-consciousness, and through language have the ability to, you know, hold ideas and tell stories about the past, tell stories about the future, and tell stories about the present and tell stories about the future in terms of what we can imagine. All of that space that is essentially hosted in our nervous system is a space that we can potentially abstract from biology in, at the same time as recognizing that that abstraction is still hosted in our biology. It's still hosted on the structure of our nervous system, and there's still processes are happening. There's neural pathways, there's synapses, there's all these types of things that are providing all of that we probably don't understand, and we probably don't even need to understand it in any real detail. But again, like, I'm trying not to like create a duality, but there is this space that we have as humans to sort of take ourselves away from biology a little bit. And if we keep doing that, keep layering on. So one way that I like to think about this is when we do that, because we can't hold all of our biology sort of in our heads at once, whatever we're holding is a simplification of our own biology and, you know, the biology and ecosystems around us. So it's a simplification. It's a model of the real world that is a model that, again, it's hosted on our nervous system, and that has developed in lockstep with ourselves and our environment through all of our current history. So even our model is going to sort of be individual and bespoke based on who we are. And then when we then start to have a conversation with another person, we might realize that our simplifications that each of us have made are different, and then we might try and like come up with another one that is sort of a model that's between us, which is sort of adding another level of complication onto it, and then we end up getting really complicated and really abstract, and then we have, you know, forms of governance and money and economics and, you know, all of these things that
that's actually what we're tapping into here in this think tank, is to try to grapple with these structures and these systems. And if I could just try to, let's say, simplify it in the way that duality is a reality among other realities at the same time. It's not that I would say trying to find one truth. There are more truths at the same time, and so not to head down the road of trying to figure out which one is it. You know.
So this potentially becomes quite important, because if we sort of hold a space for the idea that we all have our own truths, and we don't get beyond that, what that essentially does is it really only enables us to interact with the world as an individual. And what we can come at this, or come to this conclusion from lots of pathways, but essentially if we agree with the idea that we're a social being, or that we spend time in groups and so forth, the question then becomes, to what degree as a group must we align to actually be a functioning group, which is to sort of become an entity that does something that's greater than what you can do as an individual, and what's sort of required to be able to do that. And part of the argument would be that there is the need to come up with shared ideas on some of these things, and if we don't do that, we don't actually have the ability to coordinate activity together. And if that, and it goes sort of sideways from there.
Yeah,
I was just, this is tapping into two things that I have been looking at because we have all these different, well, let's just start with nature because I've been learning so much. One of the things I realized when I was on Wall Street and I was trying to explain to somebody how the systems worked in the world, I suddenly realized that all the systems are exactly the same. Now, that is a very simplistic way of putting it, but I was looking at markets at that time and I was trying